5 years of marriage, he publicly kicked me out of the company to be with his secretary. The next second, he faced a crisis, and I was his only savior. He knelt before me, begging desperately, but I resolutely turned and left. The company held a management meeting. My husband's secretary was checking identifications at the entrance to the conference room. The secretary smiled at everyone entering, but when it was my turn, he sneered. I frowned and took out my head of cybersecurity employee badge, but he didn't even look at it. Ms. Vance, Mr. Sterling pities you, letting you be a manager. Don't you think you're being too arrogant? I ignored him and dialed the direct line to the CEO. Someone said my position here is just pity from you, is that true? It's just a minor issue, don't let it bother you. I'm busy, I'm hanging up. Brandon Sterling's tone was cold, and I could tell he was rushing over. The secretary clearly heard it too and rolled his eyes before letting me in. I thought the initial cold shoulder was over, but as soon as I entered the conference room, everyone inside avoided me like the plague. Wherever I sat, within seconds, others would move away. I raised an eyebrow, not bothered. My relationship with them had never been good, and I was often pointed at in the company, but I never cared. Thank you all for attending this management meeting. Since Mr. Sterling hasn't arrived yet, I'll start with a brief opening remark on his behalf. The secretary who had blocked me earlier began hosting the meeting. It started with normal business adjustments, position changes, and other issues. I found it boring, occasionally glancing at my phone screen. Due to the company's profit for this quarter decreasing by 3% compared to the previous quarter, the board believes it is necessary to reasonably cut expenses. When the secretary said this, I noticed everyone looked at me with schadenfreude, which I found inexplicable. The secretary then looked directly at me. Eleanor Vance, the cybersecurity department will be dissolved first. You haven't brought the company profit all these years, and you're the only one in the department. What's the point of just holding a title and getting paid for doing nothing? It's a terrible influence on our company. I finally understood why everyone's attitude towards me was so strange today. I felt it was absurd and countered. Are you serious? You're actually dissolving my department? The secretary scoffed, as if I couldn't understand plain English. At this point, some colleagues started kicking me while I was down. All right, Eleanor Vance, isn't it clear enough? If you can't handle it, reflect on yourself. You've been playing on your phone since the meeting started. Disrespecting the secretary is disrespecting Mr. Sterling. You wouldn't not know that, would you? Hearing this, I was speechless for a moment. I was checking my phone to constantly monitor the firewall data to prevent any viruses from breaching the company's core data while I'm not there. How does that become disrespecting Mr. Sterling in your mouths? How can they talk nonsense about things they know nothing about? Seeing me say this, everyone immediately changed their tune. What's the point of your monitoring? There are rarely that many dangers, we've never heard of it. Exactly. Who knows what you slack off doing in your office every day, and now you're pretending to work hard? Who are you trying to fool? It's just because Mr. Sterling is coming. Looking at how hostile everyone was towards me, I never realized so many people looked down on me. I was actually being mocked for the company never having been breached. In this situation, I suddenly remembered an online anecdote about a programmer colleague who, when he had nothing to do, would create some bugs himself so people would call him to fix them. That way, people wouldn't think he wasn't doing anything. This was exactly the same. Working quietly and getting things done really doesn't pay off. Since that's the case, I didn't need to be polite anymore. I slowly stood up and looked into each of their eyes. If the company didn't have me, you'd all be out of a job long ago. Do you think you'd be here yelling at me now? Let me be blunt, the cybersecurity department is the most important department in this company, got it? As soon as I said this, the secretary was even more scornful. Who gave you the nerve to think you're so important? Mr. Sterling? Eleanor Vance, don't be naive. I wanted to say more, but the conference room door opened, and someone yelled, "Shut up." Brandon Sterling entered the conference room in a tailored suit and dress shoes. The conference room suddenly fell silent. The secretary quickly pulled out a chair for him, but he didn't rush to sit down. Instead, he walked a few steps towards me, his tone terrible. "Eleanor Vance, stop being alarmist here. Putting on an act will only make me detest you more." I was slightly stunned. I thought his shut up was directed at the secretary, but it seemed he was talking to me. Before I could say anything, Brandon Sterling continued, "I just regret letting you join the company. I really don't understand why Grandfather Sterling insisted on bringing in someone like you, just for show. Who do you think you're being arrogant with? Whose company can't function without you? We had been married for 5 years, and as a couple married in name only, we should at least maintain appearances outside." His direct, face-to-face me like that shocked me deeply, and my expression turned cold. 5 years ago, Richard Sterling, relying on his family's old ties, had me come to Brandon Sterling's company to be the head of cybersecurity. "The company is facing a moment of crisis, Eleanor Vance. Thank you for offering your help." Brandon Sterling's attitude was excellent then. I could tell he hadn't been back from studying abroad for long, his face was still very young and naive. Later, Richard Sterling specifically played matchmaker, bringing Brandon Sterling and me together. I had fallen for him at first sight from the very beginning. Otherwise, with my personality, no matter how much they offered, I would never have agreed to the match. Just helping Richard Sterling would have been enough. At that time, I thought Brandon Sterling might not necessarily love me, but at least he had some feelings, so he was willing to try. He initially just said we'd see how it goes, but seeing how it goes turned into 5 years. Time passed, and he forgot about my silent contributions. Looking at his cold face, I said in a low voice, "If you want to dissolve cybersecurity, you need to go ask Richard Sterling first. If he agrees, I'll agree." I came to Sterling Corp because of the connection between Richard Sterling and my grandfather Sterling, not anyone else here. Hearing this, Brandon Sterling's face immediately showed a hint of guilt, and after a while, he blustered, "What? Are you trying to use Grandfather Sterling against me? What else can you do besides abuse your connections? I really don't know what Grandfather Sterling saw in you, insisting you come in, only for you to be a freeloader in the company." Looking at Brandon Sterling, I couldn't see any trace of the person he was back then. At this point, the other colleagues also couldn't sit still and rushed to drive me away. "Why aren't you leaving quickly? Mr. Sterling has already spoken. Eleanor Vance, you're an adult, you don't need to keep hanging on like this, right? Why make such an ugly scene? Wouldn't it be better to part amicably? Eleanor Vance, you're not going to throw a dramatic scene, are you?" I was initially confused, but seeing these few people clustered together, I suddenly understood. If I remembered correctly, there were rumors that these few people were colluding, taking kickbacks and earning illicit money on the sly. The one who led the mockery earlier had also tried to sound me out, subtly asking if I would fabricate data, which I directly refused. I didn't think of it then, but now it all connects. It seemed that was also when people in the company started seeing me as an outsider, and I was targeted everywhere. It turns out they were all troublemakers. Brandon Sterling is still idiotic enough to believe them. I really don't know what he learned when he studied abroad. I turned to the one who had called me hanging on, intending to expose their actions directly. If I remembered correctly, his surname was Adams. "Mr. Adams, just because I didn't help you with your accounting and website, there's no need for you to go destroying me completely, is there? And Mr. Davis, Mr. Wilson, why are you so eager to get me to leave? Whose turf did my cybersecurity department step on?" Hearing I was going to expose them, their faces immediately looked unnatural, but Brandon Sterling acted as if he hadn't heard. Mr. Adams was the first to react. He blustered with a terrible tone, "What kind of baseless accusation are you making here? When did I ever talk to you? Do you have evidence?" Brandon Sterling, completely oblivious to my hint, frowned impatiently. "You incompetent person, trying to viciously slander the company's contributors before you leave?" I laughed coldly and countered, "Contributors? Which of the people standing here right now is a contributor?" As soon as I said this, their faces became even uglier. I continued, "Mr. Edwards's $5 million watch isn't something he could afford, is it? Didn't Mr. Wilson just buy a waterfront villa in the city? Mr. Davis just sent his child to study abroad recently, didn't he? Mr. Wilson slammed the table, his face full of frustration. You're viciously slandering me. I've been in this position since the company was founded. If I wasn't loyal to the company, you wouldn't even have a chance to open your lousy cybersecurity department. How can you say that? I've worked my heart out for the company for so many years. I'm only taking what I deserve. I have a clear conscience. Mr. Davis looked at me coldly, still defiant. Watching them stubbornly deny everything, I scoffed. Brandon Sterling didn't know that if it weren't for me, Sterling Corp would have been carved up long ago. The small portion they were taking illicit profits from was from a loophole the previous programmer left. I discovered the loophole and fixed it long ago. Otherwise, he, a spoiled heir, wouldn't have everything taken care of for him, just signing documents for business, and still be able to arrogantly tell me to leave. The company faced external threats and internal problems, and he sat in the CEO position completely out of touch. Not to mention the previous 5 years, just the past 6 months, there were cyber attacks from competitor companies more than once, but they were all blocked. I submitted reports, but he never paid attention. Brandon Sterling once told me I just needed to be just for show in the company, but because I promised Richard Sterling, I directly used my core expertise to write the code. On one hand, it was to repay his favor. Now Richard Sterling is in poor health and not involved in business, so Brandon Sterling isn't pretending anymore? He thinks he can run the show at Sterling Corp? My fists clenched, knuckles cracking. After a while, I finally spoke, looking directly into Brandon Sterling's eyes. Brandon Sterling, I'll ask you one thing. Are you absolutely sure you want me to leave? Brandon Sterling seemed never to have seen me look at him like that before. He was stunned for a while before snapping back, yes. Seeing this, I no longer had any intention of reminding him further. He would face the consequences sooner or later. The managers on the side were still yelling for me to leave. Brandon Sterling's disgust was undisguised. Eleanor Vance, I advise you to leave voluntarily. The company doesn't need people like you who tack salary and do nothing. Also, don't complain to Grandfather Sterling. If you do, I'll never respect you. I suppressed the anger in my heart, gritting my teeth and replying, don't worry, I haven't fallen so low. Brandon Sterling, I just hope you don't regret this decision in the future. But even though I said I wouldn't, Brandon Sterling remained suspicious of me throughout. I consciously took off my employee badge and slammed it on the conference room table in front of everyone. I was about to turn and leave when Brandon Sterling suddenly called out to me. For a moment, I thought he had changed his mind, but then he just said, since you've laid everything bare, I won't pretend either. We're getting a divorce. Eleanor Vance, I've never loved you all these years. Hearing this, I scoffed self-deprecatingly, don't worry, I haven't deluded myself to that extent. His decision was within my expectations. How could Brandon Sterling possibly think that after doing all this, I would still have feelings for him? Even if he didn't bring it up, I would divorce him tomorrow. 5 years of marriage, Brandon Sterling and I were married in name only, lived together but didn't share a bed, only putting on a show for Richard Sterling. As for our life, we always lived separate lives. Before Brandon Sterling could speak, the colleagues around him started fawning again. Mr. Sterling's decision is wise. I don't know what hope there was in being with someone like her. Exactly, she's useless, completely unworthy of Mr. Sterling. It's good it wasn't many years of marriage, not much wasted, better to cut your losses. Feeling his cold attitude, I turned back and looked at him. Have you thought about how you'll tell Richard Sterling? Brandon Sterling was slightly taken aback, then frowned fiercely. None of your business. Just leave now, I'll explain to Grandfather Sterling myself. By the end, he seemed to have thought of something, and a half-smile played on his lips. 5 years of being together made it instantly clear what he meant. He was probably relying on Richard Sterling's affection for him, had already found someone else, and was preparing to act unilaterally. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but scoff. What, did you think of something that makes you so happy? Found someone already? As soon as I said this, Brandon Sterling seemed to snap out of it and suppress that hint of a smile. He glared at me fiercely for a while before speaking, it has nothing to do with you. Even if I did, she'd be 100 times, 1,000 times better than you. What right do you, an employee about to leave, have to ask about the company's future hiring? The colleagues on the side also chimed in, saying Brandon Sterling's judgment was definitely right, at least better than me, who was just for show. Just leave quickly. What are you still hanging around for, being a nuisance? Aren't you afraid people will laugh at you? The secretary spoke, seemingly annoyed to look at me any longer. Seeing this, I didn't want to say more and stated directly, if I really leave, I'll also remove the firewall I independently developed. Because it's my work. I've also applied for a patent, it's not for others to benefit from for free. Hearing this, the colleagues' faces showed obvious mockery and disdain. I thought it was something. What use is your broken thing? We never see it working, there are no virus attacks on the company. It's junk we don't even need, and you're treating it like a treasure. I didn't say anything, but just looked at Brandon Sterling. He was the person in charge. Removing the firewall required his approval. Brandon Sterling's face showed obvious hesitation. Clearly, as someone in upper management, he knew more about the importance of the firewall than the ordinary colleagues. He hadn't expected me to be so absolute about this. Perhaps he initially just wanted me gone, although he had suspected me of getting paid for doing nothing all these years. He didn't really doubt my basic programmer skills. Otherwise, he wouldn't have paid me a stagnant salary for so many years. He was worried that competitors would exploit the gap if the firewall was removed today. Brandon Sterling didn't speak, and the other employees naturally didn't dare to either, just whispering among themselves. For a moment, the atmosphere was frozen, no one moved. Just then, I felt the conference room door open again, and a woman around my age, wearing a business dress, walked in. She met my eyes, her attitude arrogant. Eleanor Vance, if you want to remove your firewall, remove it. I'm here now, the company doesn't need you. Seeing this woman arrive, Brandon Sterling's face visibly relaxed, and he no longer hesitated towards me. All right, Eleanor Vance, hurry up and leave. I don't care about what you wrote anyway. Seeing this, I nodded knowingly, took out my laptop, and quickly removed the firewall in a few quick steps. Bytes moved across the screen. The woman watched me, laughing mockingly. That architecture must be years old. I don't know why you're bragging about it. I can break through your firewall with just one layer of code. Hearing her say this, I looked up and truly looked at her, my tone neither cold nor warm, slightly mocking. Oh, you're a fellow professional. You can tell that. Before the woman could introduce herself, Brandon Sterling stood beside her and said proudly, "This is Ashley Miller. I paid a lot to bring her back from San Francisco. She has her own cybersecurity company in San Francisco, specializing in firewalls, much more advanced than yours." I typed the last layer of code, my hands leaving the keyboard, and adopted a posture of listening attentively. Is that so? Ms. Miller is so capable. Where did you study? Were you from one of San Francisco's top university programs or trained by a famous international mentor? Ashley Miller was stunned. For a moment, she didn't understand the schools and teachers I mentioned, but she became even more arrogant. I'm self-taught. I got interested in college. What, are you upset that someone not from those schools is better than you? Facing her mockery, I scoffed meaningfully. Since she wasn't from a proper training background, I had no desire to interact with her. We were simply not in the same world. Brandon Sterling clearly heard the hidden meaning in my words, and Ashley Miller quickly asked, "Eleanor Vance, what do you mean?" Looking down on Ashley Miller, I inwardly smirked noncommittally. Seeing that everything was complete on the laptop screen, I turned and prepared to leave. Actually, that was just my test to see if she was one of the people in the industry. When you reach a certain level in our field, you can grasp the deepest secrets of the field. The famous masters in the field all know each other. When I was a graduate student and my mentor taught me, I had already met countless masters in the field. Someone like Ashley Miller, let alone others, didn't even qualify to meet me. My colleagues looked at me packing my laptop with schadenfreude. Ashley Miller also turned to Brandon Sterling and vowed confidently, "Brandon, don't worry, leave everything to me. I'll definitely write better, more robust code than hers. Someone like her would have been eliminated years ago if the company hadn't kept her on. I don't know why she's still hanging around. Just from the way she addressed him, everyone present, being experienced individuals, realized their relationship was unusual. Brandon Sterling's face showed a faint blush, and he nodded obediently. You'll definitely be fine, you're the new network manager. I paused in packing my things, too lazy to listen to them flaunting their relationship, and left directly. Just as I exited the company building, someone seemed to call out to me from behind. I turned slightly and saw it was Ashley Miller chasing after me, a provocative smile on her face. Eleanor Vance, you notice. My relationship with Brandon is special, right? I heard he hasn't touched you all these years you've been together. Thanks for taking care of my husband for me. So? My expression grew colder. She continued, but you two are even, aren't you? He did let you get paid for nothing at the company for so many years. While thanking me, she didn't forget to imply I was useless. What did you say? The anger that had been suppressed since entering the conference room was instantly ignited by her few words. I grabbed her wrist and pulled her closer, looking into her startled eyes, and said fiercely, I'm telling you, Ashley Miller. Without me, this company hiring an amateur like you is doomed. My biggest regret is working for these incompetents in their ivory tower. With that, I released her wrist, leaving only one sentence, I hope you don't regret this. I really didn't want to cause any more trouble, and even less did I want to have any ties with this company. Eleanor Vance, what are you doing? Unexpectedly, as soon as I spoke, Brandon Sterling came out. And Ashley Miller, the moment I released her, pretended to be pushed down and cried out in pain, even if you're upset, you shouldn't hit people. Slap! Before I could react, Brandon Sterling stood up for Ashley Miller and slapped me hard across the face. This will only make me hate you more. You useless person, you can't hit people just because you're bad at your job. My head tilted slightly from the blow. It was clear Brandon Sterling had used all his strength. Seeing I didn't speak, Brandon Sterling helped up the wailing Ashley Miller, continuing to curse, someone like you disgusts me. Never appear before me again. You're not even worth one of Ashley Miller's fingers. He simply trampled my dignity underfoot. At this moment, I was completely disheartened with Brandon Sterling. I took a deep breath and replied, all right. Then I'll tell you, from now on, Sterling Corp's survival has nothing to do with me. Get lost, stop cursing my company. We're strangers from now on. Brandon Sterling rushed me to leave, unconcerned, and even mocked me a few times. Who do you think you are? You think you can decide what happens to my company? What a joke. I twitched the corner of my mouth, truly hoping he could still smile in the future. Just then, a stretch limousine suddenly stopped at the company entrance. As the car door opened, an elderly man with white hair but still full of vitality was helped out. He yelled with a strong voice, let me see who wants to kick Eleanor Vance out. My heart was slightly startled. Richard Sterling? Brandon Sterling was just as surprised as I was. He rushed forward to greet him. Grandfather Sterling? Aren't you at the retirement facility? Richard Sterling's face showed no curiosity. He spoke sternly to Brandon Sterling. Retirement facility? If I were still at the retirement home, you'd have run your company into the ground by now. Apologize to Eleanor Vance. Brandon Sterling hadn't expected Richard Sterling's first words to be this. He couldn't accept it at all. Richard Sterling's words in just a few sentences sparked his rebellious nature. Grandfather Sterling, I don't care who told you this, but why does it have to be Eleanor Vance? What if I insist on using Ashley Miller? Richard Sterling frowned, his sharp eyes sweeping over Ashley Miller, who didn't dare to breathe, and he snorted, she's not worthy. As soon as he said this, Brandon Sterling and Ashley Miller's faces were very unpleasant. After a while, Brandon Sterling spoke with a pale face, you're always like this, trying to control my life since I was a child. Today, I insist on using Ashley Miller, not just because of her ability, but she's also pregnant with my child. As soon as this was said, everyone was shocked. Although I had no feelings for Brandon Sterling now, hearing him directly admit to cheating still made me very angry. You were already cheating with her? No wonder you were in such a hurry to divorce me today. Richard Sterling's eyes widened slightly, even more angry than me. He tapped his cane on the ground several times, cursing, You. Don't you know shame? How can I have a grandson like you? Brandon Sterling said it now, with a sort of defiant acceptance. I hope you can support us. Grandfather Sterling, we truly love each other. You want me to support you? Richard Sterling was so angry he could barely speak. Brandon Sterling seemed clearly set on his decision. I knew he would act unilaterally, but I hadn't expected it in this form. You unfilial son! How could you do something that disgraces the family name? Richard Sterling stepped forward several times, trying to hit Brandon Sterling with his cane. Grandfather Sterling! Calm down, I truly love Brandon. Ashley Miller stepped forward, shielding Brandon Sterling. You get lost too. Richard Sterling couldn't catch his breath. The assistant with him quickly gave him oxygen to inhale a few times. Grandfather Sterling! Brandon Sterling, red-eyed, wanted to step forward with concern, but Ashley Miller held him back. Don't call me Grandfather Sterling. Richard Sterling was still cursing after he recovered. Just then, Brandon Sterling's phone suddenly rang. Brandon Sterling, realizing belatedly, answered the call and forgot to turn off the speaker. The secretary's anxious voice came through the next second. Mr. Sterling, it's bad. Someone is attacking the firewall right now, it seems it can't hold up. The alarms are going off. Brandon Sterling's face also changed. When he spoke again, his voice cracked. Why does it have to be today? I laughed coldly to myself. Yes, why today? Brandon Sterling looked at me thoughtfully, somewhat lost. Ashley Miller immediately stepped forward, seeming to want to prove herself to Richard Sterling. Leave the firewall to me. It'll be fine. Haven't the alarms gone off before? I just smiled on the side and said nothing. My firewall could ignore this level of cyber attack, so of course, I wouldn't hear the alarm. Just as Ashley Miller was about to say more, the secretary on the other end of the phone was even more panicked. Ashley Miller's firewall, it was gone in less than a minute. How is that possible? Ashley Miller was disbelieving, trembling slightly. I learned everything bit by bit from courses and teachers. How could there be a problem? Is that so? Which teacher? I just asked casually, and Ashley Miller immediately exploded, yelling at me, Shut up. What business is it of yours which teacher? Are you kicking me while I'm down now? I scoffed. Without needing to guess, I knew it was definitely from online courses from unknown instructors and programming classes. She had studied for 2 days and was overflowing with confidence. Her company in San Francisco was probably just a front. What should we do? Brandon Sterling panicked. Although he managed the cybersecurity company, he was completely clueless about these things. But more anxious than them was Richard Sterling. The firewall is gone? Seeing Richard Sterling showing signs of oxygen deprivation again, I quickly stepped forward to support him. Grandfather Sterling, don't worry, the core project files are still protected by my defense. This level of alarm can't breach that for now. Richard Sterling grabbed my arm. Only then did he relax, his face full of lingering fear. Brandon Sterling couldn't care less about what we were saying now and kept urging Ashley Miller. Ashley Miller, hurry and save the company. If the basic data is leaked, we're finished. Ashley Miller had no choice but to open her laptop to try and save it. However, the moment it turned on, she found her computer had already been invaded. The entire screen displayed foreign hackers' mocking gestures and the data leak progress bar. What should I do? I don't know how to handle this. Ashley Miller's face was pale, and she was helpless. It's over, it's all over. Watching the data completely disappear, Brandon Sterling knew he was completely finished. For a moment, he couldn't even stand. In his panic, he saw me standing calmly on the side and remembered I was also a programmer. He grabbed me and pulled me in front of the computer. Eleanor Vance, you know computers, right? You must know how to fix this. I looked at the screen and knew how to fix it, but I didn't move. I do, but I have nothing to do with you now, Brandon Sterling. Did you forget? You're the one who made me leave just now. I'm not part of your company anymore. You. Seeing that his sense of entitlement didn't work, Brandon Sterling gasped in surprise, his face twisted abnormally with suppressed anger. Just this one time, can't you help? I held up 6 fingers and laughed. You want me to do private work? 6 figures to start, no upper limit. Seeing that I was completely unyielding, he hadn't expected me to be so expensive. He felt a bit helpless and looked at Richard Sterling again. Richard Sterling, having heard that the core project files were safe, had no intention of helping him. Meeting his gaze, he snorted, "What nerve do you have to bother Ms. Vance? Years ago, people outside couldn't easily hire her. You think you can just order her around with a few words?" Brandon Sterling didn't know why Richard Sterling had suddenly become so respectful towards me. For a moment, he felt like Richard Sterling was talking about a completely different person. After a long while, he mumbled, "Grandfather Sterling, what are you talking about?" Richard Sterling looked at him in disappointment and cursed, "You blind fool. You still think Eleanor Vance is a regular programmer? She's a top-tier hacker I finally managed to invite back using old ties. It was elevating you to have her with you back then," Richard Sterling explained. Brandon Sterling was stunned for a long time. When he SPO. Coup again, he was full of disbelief. "Just her?" Richard Sterling continued, "Yes. It's Eleanor Vance. This was a good match I specifically found for you. Look at what you're doing now. And you're carrying someone else's illegitimate child. I'm so disappointed." Brandon Sterling clearly hadn't realized the importance of the situation. The amount of information was too much for him to process at once. But the look in his eyes towards me truly changed. Richard Sterling explained again, "You really thought I invited her back just to do simple defense for your company?" "No?" Brandon Sterling was completely dumbfounded now. Richard Sterling scoffed, "That was secondary. The main thing was to provide protection for Sterling Group's cooperation project with the government. Otherwise, if this information leaked, the consequences could affect the entire situation, you idiot." Seeing this, I also nodded at Brandon Sterling. The hacker who attacked Ashley Miller's firewall just now was targeting the core project files of that project. Invading your company was just convenient. Hearing this news, Brandon Sterling couldn't believe there were so many complexities involved. But how could such important files be put in? Ashley Miller was even more unable to accept it. Just as she was about to argue about the file location, Richard Sterling roared, "Shut up. I'll deal with you and Brandon Sterling later. It's a complete disgrace to the Sterling family." Now that the project was safe, Richard Sterling relaxed. He held my hand and softly instructed, "Then I'll leave it to you. Please pay more attention in the future." I squeezed his hand and nodded slightly. Richard Sterling turned and prepared to get in the car. Seeing him about to leave, Brandon Sterling rushed forward in a panic. "Grandfather Sterling, what about my company?" Richard Sterling looked back from the car, bewildered. "You caused this mess yourself. You fix it yourself. Aren't you capable? Didn't you not want me to interfere? You got someone else pregnant and you still have the nerve to ask me? Sterling Corp isn't your only company." As soon as he finished speaking, the car door slammed shut. Brandon Sterling was completely stunned. Ashley Miller's laptop was completely dead and wouldn't boot up again. I had watched the show and was about to leave when Brandon Sterling grabbed my arm. His face was full of anxiety, his tone humble. "Eleanor Vance. I was wrong, I was blind. I shouldn't have treated you that way. I beg you, save the company's lost database." I yanked my arm free and retorted coldly, "Why should I help you? Didn't you hear Grandfather Sterling? It's 6 figures to hire me now, and Brandon Sterling, you're not qualified to hire me. I stopped earning your company's stagnant salary long ago." Brandon Sterling was speechless. After thinking for a long time, he said with difficulty, his eyes red, "Will you get back together with me? I was really wrong. Please give me another chance." Ashley Miller snapped out of her daze and rushed forward, saying, "Brandon, you can't do this. Slap, get lost." Brandon Sterling slapped Ashley Miller across the face and roared, "You liar. Get lost." Ashley Miller held her face, full of disbelief. Brandon Sterling didn't spare her another glance. He turned to me and said, "Eleanor Vance, come back, nobody in the company will give you a hard time anymore." I scoffed. So he had known all along. But I didn't need it now. No need. Wish you luck with your new family. After that day, just a few days after I got home, Brandon Sterling bothered me again. "What do you want?" I was very impatient when I opened the door. Brandon Sterling's face was faintly pale and weak. He hesitated for a long time before speaking. "I received the court summons." "Eleanor Vance, how could you file for divorce?" I leaned against the doorframe and raised an eyebrow. "You cheated first, of course I'd file for divorce." When Brandon Sterling heard me say this, tears immediately streamed down his face. "Can't you help me out again for grandfather Sterling's sake? The company is really failing now." I knew this was why he had come today. "Did you get grandfather Sterling's permission to come here?" Brandon Sterling no longer had the arrogance he showed when he fired me. He just shook his head slightly. I called Richard Sterling right in front of him, briefly explained the situation, and asked for his advice. The old man on the other end of the phone was silent for a moment, then snorted coldly, clearly still angry. "Eleanor Vance, just do as you see fit." After hanging up, I refused again. "Sorry, I'm not going to do any more work for your company." Brandon Sterling had clearly heard Richard Sterling's attitude. Tears immediately flowed like a flood, and he choked out, "Why? Grandfather Sterling is completely unfair. I was clearly his favorite growing up. And you, Eleanor Vance, why are you so heartless? I even made Ashley Miller get an abortion for you." I shrugged, unmoved by his breakdown. "You chose this path yourself. This is your own doing." Saying this, I slammed the door shut. "Eleanor Vance, won't you listen to just one more word from me? I really know I was wrong. Please." After that, no matter how much Brandon Sterling knocked on the door, I didn't open it or respond. Brandon Sterling finally stumbled away. A few days later, Sterling Corp announced its restructuring and started anew. I knew the company didn't go bankrupt directly, which must have been Richard Sterling's doing. He ultimately didn't give up on the small company under Sterling Group. But it seems he intervened not for Brandon Sterling, because I heard Brandon Sterling was directly demoted to an entry-level employee. It was probably for the core project files. The small company was still useful. Richard Sterling had more than one grandson. Treating Brandon Sterling this way was also a display of his attitude towards me. Brandon Sterling, the future heir, was ruined and could no longer be supported. Sterling Group would choose a new heir in the future. Ashley Miller was also targeted by Sterling Corp and left in disgrace, with no possibility of development in the future. After some time, I received another job offer from Sterling Corp, but this time it wasn't from Brandon Sterling's small company. It was a formal invitation from Sterling Group. When I was invited into the Sterling Corp building by Richard Sterling again, I was still in the role of head of cybersecurity. "This way, Ms. Vance, please." Richard Sterling was extremely respectful towards me, and the looks of the surrounding employees all changed. Only then did I realize that those few who were taking illicit profits had also been fired by Richard Sterling. Among the entry-level employees, I saw Brandon Sterling. He looked at me with tears in his eyes, but I didn't want to look at him again. From then on, we were strangers from now on, with no further ties.